For liberals, education is ultimately about freedom. It's about freeing people from ignorance and creating opportunity in its stead. And I hope that this afternoon, this discussion that we have will help to stimulate our ideas about how that can best be achieved. The writer H.G. Wells wrote that history is a race between education and catastrophe. Only by getting the teaching right can we ensure the victory of the former over the latter.
I'm very honored to be the moderator of this panel, Teaching History, Europe and Nations. We have with us three panelists whose presentations will help us to better understand the importance of history teaching in Europe. The first panelist is Professor Marcel Spischer, who has teaching history in secondary school for many years, and now he is a member of the scientific committee in charge of the elaboration of French-German history textbook.
In 2003, in Berlin, to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Elysee Treaty, there was a meeting of about 2,000 young people, 1,000 from Germany and 1,000 from France. 3 weeks later, I was invited to the Ministry of Education. There I met 7 other French people and 8 Germans. Nobody knew why we'd been convened. We were told, ladies and gentlemen, you will draft a Franco-German history textbook. Let me just mention some of the problems we came up against. The first problem was content. It's easy to write a school textbook, but you have to have a program, you have to have a syllabus. The second problem is we had to have the same teaching methods. Now, we did have some teaching methods in common, because in both countries, history is not something that you learn by heart. It's an analysis of documents. You look at historical documents. If you want to know who Bronislaw Geremek was, you don't start with his life story. You start by looking at one of his speeches.
If young people in school receive narrative from a single perspective, it will be, at a later stage, very hard to open their minds for other interpretations or perspectives. It's clear to me, and with me many others in the profession, that history educators therefore have to find ways to offer a multi-perspective approach to the past already to very young people. History educators should make their students understand that history is not purely facts, but in the first place interpretation, depending on posed questions and available evidence. However, they also should understand that professional historians publish honest and truthful studies based on scholarly rules of the subject, attempting to approach this truth as closely as possible.
The idea of a European textbook is currently a topic of debate, intended to inspire social and cultural cohesion, and that is needed, of course. Such a book, however, also runs the risk of achieving quite the opposite. For in the debate, Europe and its history are often understood merely in terms of values and ideas coming from the current centers resulting in Western dominance, as showed. Little space would remain in the standardized master narrative for the identities of the whole of the European space and in particular of the new EU member state. So our institute, a bit similar to what Joka has developed, is establishing a website collecting textbook examples from all the European countries of how they present views on Europe across the whole 20th century.
Europe should not only stand for politics, directives and regulations, but also for preserving a common heritage and democratic and fundamental values, common values, while defending the respect for diversity. At the end of my short introduction, I would like to pay a tribute to Professor Bronislaw Geremek, a historical figure in the fight for democracy, not only in Poland, but also in Europe, who witnessed the evolution of the European history from the very beginning. As Professor Bronislaw Geremek said when he was talking about European identity, we have made the Europe, now we have to make Europeans.
We have to be convinced that the future of Europe is an integration as a real historical change. A good omen for the future may also be the fact that Europe has two lungs, the eastern one and the western one. Both lungs provide oxygen needed for future development. The West provides economic strength, well-functioning economies and so on, and the East has its fresh energy, longing for better life. We have to think of Europe as a community of values, said Professor Geremek, and that's how we can make and create Europeans.
The problems facing societies are no longer problems which a single power can hope to resolve. These are problems involving geopolitical relations, where various states can share experiences which could offer solutions. Now, I think Europe has to state that its intention is to invent a peaceful concept of the nation, a peaceful concept which would lead to patriotism, meaning emotional attachment to a certain area or history. But what would no longer be possible is to attach any absolute value to that sentiment and draw upon it to assert your superiority over everyone else.
If you take a look at many of the inhabitants of Central and Eastern Europe, then the 20th century was a horrendous century. But towards the end of the century, there was emancipation and democracy. If we really want to create a European identity today and have a true European historical overview for future generations, then we have to have some kind of common basis. Constructive identity cannot be based on negative examples from history. But obviously one has to be careful about demonization, and I think one has to make sure that you have the right kind of examples and leading figures in history lessons. And we have to do away with this unholy division, split between the East and the West, or something which is, we have to overcome this.
When we discuss what is there something like a common European history? No, of course it is not, because there are many languages, so there are many different stories of histories. And this diversity is something which unites us, and this is what we are proud of. But I wouldn't say we only have national histories, because the national states, they were invented, or there's a better word in English, but I don't have it in my mind right now, but they were formed in the 19th century, and before that we did not have all these national ideas. So it is not written on stone that we have to keep on national histories, that we can find a common European identity. But how can we find it? I think we really should support all initiatives. We shouldn't have only an army of soldiers. We should have an army of broad cultural initiatives which teach us how to live together in a multicultural society, because this is the biggest challenge we have in the 21st century, our forming, building, living together in a multicultural society. And I think we all, historians, scientists, politicians, should really take this very seriously.